In this exercise, I'll show you yet another new stroking function inside of Illustrator CS5. Specifically, I'll show you how to vary the width of a stroke using this tool right there, the Width tool. Now here's the idea. I'm working inside this illustration called loopylines.ai. It's found inside the 07 Fill Stroke folder. And let's say I select this big, thick looping path outline. Notice up here in the control panel that the line weight is 50 points, and that's a uniform line weight. In other words, at each and every point along the path outline, the stroke is 50 points thick, 25 points on one side, 25 points on the other. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can make the stroke thinner at some points, thicker at others, using that Width tool. Now, I should say this is not Illustrator's first foray into the world of variable width strokes. If you have a pressure-sensitive input device, then for years you've been able to use the paintbrush tool to paint variable width brush strokes, which are slightly different creatures, as we'll see when we take a look at art brushes in the advanced portion of this series. But for now, the great thing about the Width tool is it allows you to lay down width points at very specific locations on a path outline. So there's a couple of different ways to approach this topic. One is to apply a preset profile. So notice if I go up here to the control panel, right next door to the stroke options is this guy, Variable Width Profile. And if you click on it, you get a pop-up menu of some predefined variable width profiles. And so, for example, I could click on this lozenge shape right there to start the stroke very thin, make it thick in the middle, and end it thin again. So a very simple variable width stroke. Or you can switch up to something a little more interesting. The second option gets thick, then thin, then thicker again, and it ends up looking like this. Now, at any point in time, you can customize one of these presets. Just go ahead and switch over to the Width tool, which you can get by pressing Shift-W. And then the moment you hover over the outline, you'll see these white circular points, and each one of them represents a width point. So if you hover over one of these existing width points, then it'll become solidly colored. In our case, blue, because the color assigned to this layer is blue. And you can either click on that point in order to stick it and make it active, and then you can drag those handles on either side of the stroke to make the stroke thicker or thinner. Totally up to you. Another way to work is to just hover over one of these points and then move your cursor over one of the handles, so you don't absolutely have to click on a point if you don't want to, and then drag the handle to a different location. But what I want to do is show you how to invent one of these variable width strokes from scratch. So I'll go up to this variable width profile option, click on it, and switch back to uniform so that we have assigned a uniform stroke once again. And it's become a little thinner for me. Notice it's only 45 points thick now. It might be different for you. It's just a function of having made the stroke thinner at various locations along the path outline. All right, but now we can set it to anything we want. So I'm going to grab the Width tool, and the way you start things off is by dragging somewhere in the middle of the path. In other words, not on one of the endpoints. That's not a good way to start. Rather, you want to start at some other location. Doesn't really matter where, as long as it's not an endpoint. I'm going to start right there, and I'm just going to drag outward like so. And I'll make the line weight slightly thicker than it is currently. All right, now that I've done that, now that I've set a single width point, Illustrator goes ahead and automatically applies width points to the endpoints. Notice that right there. If I hover over this endpoint, I can see a width point. And if I want to change the width, for example, let's say I want to make it thinner, then I would go ahead and hover over the point, just move my cursor over the handle, and then drag it inward like so. And I'll make it quite thin, as you see there. And let's do the same thing at the other endpoint. I'll go ahead and move it inward as well. All right, and now I'm going to make the path outline thinner at this location. That still means dragging out from the center like so. And if you drag close in, then you're going to get a thin stroke. Farther out, obviously, a thicker stroke. I'm going to keep it pretty tight at this location. And then I'll drag out from the bottom to thicken that up. And then I'll drag out from this side to make things thinner. And then I'll drag out from this side to make things thicker again. And so you can apply as many width points as you like. You can totally go your own way. Don't feel like you have to do the same thing I'm doing. And you can make things as complicated or as simple as you like. For example, consider this arrow right here, this red arrow. There's no sense in it getting sort of thicker and thinner and thicker and thinner again. It just looked blobby if we did that. What I want to see happen is I want it to start nice and thick, and then I want it to taper away at the end. So we'll start things off near the arrowhead, and this is one of those new CS5 arrowheads, of course, and I'll drag outward like so in order to thicken the stroke of the arrowhead. Notice that I'm thickening the stroke independently of the arrowhead, so the arrowhead's not growing any bigger. And I want you to notice something very important here. This line that I'm modifying right now was not selected. So using the width tool, you can change the width of a deselected path inside of your artwork, which can really be a gotcha, by the way. You have to keep an eye out for that, because obviously that means it's pretty easy to modify paths that you don't want to if you're not paying attention. So we'll see a few ways to protect ourselves in the next exercise. But anyway, I went ahead and made the path outline thicker at this location, and now I'll make it thinner at this location like so. And now we have a tapering arrow. And if the arrowhead's not big enough, why then I would go to the appearance panel and I would be stunned by the fact that I have a black stroke. What in the world's going on there? Well, note which path is selected currently. It's the background path that's actually selected. This foreground path, the red arrow path, isn't actually technically selected. We're seeing a few width points because I just added them with the width tool. But if I switch away from that tool back to my black arrow tool, then we can see that it's not selected at all, and we're seeing the attributes for the black loopy path. All right, something to note about that path. Notice the line weight value is 55.91 point. It's going to be different for you, of course, but it also has an asterisk next to it. That will be the same if you're working along with me. What that tells you is this is not the uniform value. This is the maximum line weight. Now, you can edit it if you want to. Just go ahead and click inside of that value, and then let's change it to something like 100. And press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac. And notice the thickness of the path grows proportionally. So the thin parts of the stroke grew and the thick parts of the stroke grew as well in order to fit inside of our new maximum width value. As soon as I click off that value, let's say I click on a fill, I'll see 100 point with an asterisk after it, indicating once again that that is the maximum thickness. All right, I'm going to undo that because I think that looks terrible, but I just wanted you to see what's going on there. Now let's click on the path for the red arrow. And I'll make that selected. And now I can see it is indeed red. 40.796 points is the maximum thickness of the stroke. I'll click on the word stroke, and if I want to make the arrowhead thicker, then I'll go ahead and select that value and change it to something else. Let's try 30% and press the Tab key, and that looks pretty darn good. So that gives you an idea of how you create variable width strokes using the width tool. In the next exercise, I'm going to show you how to create your own profile and apply it to a different illustration.